US President Donald Trump says he's very unhappy with both Israel and Iran for violating a ceasefire he had proclaimed on Monday night. Trump is demanding an end to hostilities after the US bombing of Iran's nuclear sites. He claims the country's nuclear capacities are gone. But how much have they really been degraded by those US strikes? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, a day after unprecedented US strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, the Israeli army attacked one of them again. An indication America's bombs had perhaps not been as effective as President Trump had claimed. Using stealth bunker buster bombs and submarine-launched cruise missiles, Operation Midnight Hammer targeted 3 nuclear sites.
I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
It's unknown how much damage was done. The chief of the International Atomic Energy Agency is calling for access to the damaged nuclear sites. The US strikes show America's support for Israel in its war on Iran.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history.
Iran has warned of everlasting consequences and has already retaliated by launching a missile attack on an American airbase in Qatar.
They crossed a very big red line by attacking nuclear facilities.
So, can Iran's nuclear program recover from these attacks, or could they embolden Iran's nuclear efforts? Let's meet our guests. In Tehran, we have Seyed Sadegh Emamian. He's founder and former director of the governance and policy think tank. In Washington, D.C., we have Reza Khanzadeh. He is a senior foreign policy advisor to the US-Iran Chamber of Commerce. In Berlin, in Germany, we have Thomas O'Donnell, American energy and geopolitics strategist and former global fellow of the Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. And I'm delighted to say that here with me in this studio, we have Chris Doyle, director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. Reza, to you, first of all, just give us your impression of where you think Iran's nuclear ambitions lie right now.
I think the way it's going to look moving forward is more of the same. We've noticed that even with all the strikes that have occurred on Iran's nuclear sites, there's been some hints as to when and or where US was going to strike Iran, and also when and or where Israel was going to strike Iran. So which it gave Iran, I believe, enough time for them to move certain parts of their nuclear program into other locations to keep them safe. So once the conflict ended, they could restart. Now, whether their nuclear program is going to continue to be civilian or if they will ratchet up and go even closer to a nuclear, bomb, so to speak, I think that remains to be seen, given that even the ceasefire right now doesn't seem to be in place. There was currently an attack by Israel on Iran just right now as we're speaking. So with this threat, I think Iran might find itself caught between a rock and a hard place, so to speak, where they need to have some type of, bargaining chip, if you will, to protect the regime and also to protect the country from any further type of escalation or conflicts or attacks from foreign entities. Because we also have to keep in mind that Iran is more or less, surrounded by, I think, 40 U.S. military bases, and they have neighbors in Pakistan and India and Israel who have, nuclear weapons. So they want to find themselves in a position of strength rather than weakness. So as far as any kind of conversations, I think of there being a complete, dismemberment of their nuclear program or just giving up a nuclear program, I think that's a non-starter for Iran. Because even if you ask the majority of the Iranian citizens whether or not they want a nuclear program. The vast majority do. Now, whether or not it looks, civilian or otherwise, that's a different conversation. But the vast majority of the Iranian people do want to see their country have a nuclear program.
Let's bring in Seyed. Let's bring in Seyed in Tehran. Seyed, what's your view of where the nuclear program stands right now? Is it terminal? Is it fatal, the bombing that has happened?
Actually, it's still technically unclear for me, at least, as an academic and think tanker, what has happened there. But it's clear that, as Reza said, the Iranian society has been very much in support of the nuclear civil program. That that it roots back to the pre-Islamic revolution in 1979. Even during the Shah, there was an ambition in the Iranian government to reach such kind of the nuclear technical capability. And that what happened in last few decades has been, to some extent, has put the nuclear civil program at the heart of the fabric of the Iranian politics. So anyone that is going to be in power, regardless of their political direction in the government, they are expected to follow up the nuclear civil program. But with regards to the weaponization of the nuclear program, I never am relying on the public reports, and the last one was published in late March by the intelligence community of the U.S. That there has never been any evidence of the nuclear military program, at least since 2003 onward. So I won't see any chance for nuclear militarization to be at the top of the agenda for the Iranian government, but continuing with the nuclear civil program, with some, of course, technical changes, it's something that is still expectable and I think politically very much demanded by the society as a whole.
Thomas, President Trump used the phrase obliterated. It's quite clear that has not happened because Israel then followed up with more bombs. Give us your impression of where the program now stands.
Going back a long ways, I've been working on this since, I think, the Carter administration. Clinton. What American strategists, when you hear them talk about these things, if anybody wanted to really destroy the Iranian nuclear program, it was always said it had to be done in a surprise attack because they had to get the maximum number of personnel of both engineering and skilled trades and also the leaders of it so that Iran couldn't regenerate the program. And it looks like that's what was attempted by the Israeli-U.S. alliance in this. They tried to kill as many as they could right off. I don't have a good assessment of how far they went. And they, of course, only the United States, everybody knew going way back, only the United States could possibly destroy these deep underground sites. An attempt was made, and I think there's still not, at least no public assessment of how effective that was. Even if they didn't break into the big centrifuge hall at Fordo, the vibrations and so forth might have done great damage. No doubt the program is set back considerably. I would just point out Iran has something like 400 kilograms, according to the IAEA, of 60% enriched uranium. That 60% of it is U-235 fissile uranium. No country in the world who's only got a peaceful program for reactors ever does that. It's unprecedented. So, by doing this, whether they actually intended to sometime soon or will try to sometime soon, they would have to, get sufficient centrifuges working, cascades working to up that to 90. But they wanted to at least show the West and U.S. and Israel that this was a threat and then use that for whatever negotiating purposes.
Thanks, Thomas. Chris, to you, talk to me about the scientists that have been killed, because the knowledge is still in the system. The knowledge will have been shared. So, yes, it's been a setback for Iran, but the ambition is clearly still there to become a nuclear state.
I think actually one of the hardest things will be to determine intent. I think that of all the parties concerned, so yes, they would have hit back. I totally agree with Thomas, the program, but it's not been terminated. But Iran, the Iranian leadership would have also seen a determination that perhaps they'd underestimated, both on behalf of the Israelis and the Americans. So if they wish to continue a clandestine program going towards a nuclear weapon, then they're running the risk of this going back to war, and next time there won't be a US president calling the bombers back. So I think that actually the Iranian leadership would have been somewhat shaken by all of this. The fact that they were able to target these scientists, leading members of the IRGC and others within the Iranian system, in quite an impressive tactical display of power and intelligence. So they have got some decisions here, and they may well decide to use, if they have those stocks of enriched uranium, that as a card in those negotiations. And one has to wonder, will Iran, having seen this, determine actually the long-term picture is do a really serious deal, get those sanctions lifted, and then maybe reactivate some sort of program clandestinely later on if they so wish. But if they were to try to hold on to it now, I think they will know that they will be back in a conflict situation. And clearly from the Iranian response to the Israeli and then the American strikes, they know they don't have militarily a winning hand. At best, it is to try to hold out, to stay alive, to keep the regime going. So in some ways, I think that they need to sue for peace, and I think that's why their response to the US strikes were clearly well choreographed, not designed to escalate in order to have an exit. The one party that hasn't really looked for an exit strategy was the Israelis. They were the ones that started this. Netanyahu is the one who set the region alight, not just with Iran, Syria, Palestine. And the question to my mind is, will the Israelis stay quiet? Will Trump be able to keep them quiet to allow the sort of negotiations that could produce a deal that would put the Iranian program back under proper monitoring to allow the international community to be satisfied and at ease with it to take place? And I think it's a very shaky period of time now in front of us. It's going to require some patient diplomacy. Patience is not something we've seen a lot of at the moment in the case of all the actors in this particular war.
Thanks, Chris. Reza, to you, that's a very good point Chris makes, isn't it, about Benjamin Netanyahu? He won't be satisfied. He can't be satisfied as things stand. So how difficult do you think it would be for President Trump to rein him in and try and make progress diplomatically with Iran?
Yeah, I think it will be difficult for two main reasons, but there are obviously a multitude of reasons. The first being that this is his last term, so Netanyahu essentially just needs to wait him out. But then for Netanyahu, that's also countered with his own domestic problems and his court trials and possibly imprisonment after he's finished being prime minister. But now his popularity is so high within Israel with the success of these attacks on Iran. He's currently searching for snap elections so he can get reelected. And if he does, then he just has to outweigh Trump. But then also Trump's increase in ability to possibly weigh in or to rein in Netanyahu has to do with his own domestic problems as well, because his base, although they seem to be split 50-50, I feel it's more about 60-40, maybe 70-30, that they do not want him to bring America into another engagement in the Middle East. Now, one thing we have to keep in mind is that the trauma that the U.S. population has when it comes to Iran being entangled in these endless types of wars in the Middle East primarily is rooted in the belief that actual U.S. military troops will be on the ground in a country in the Middle East. In this case, it might be Iran. That is where this push from his base is coming from for the U.S. not to get any more involved than they already are. But I think Trump's approach with this is purely, through the Air Force and supporting Netanyahu and his military with increased numbers of bombs, and also military planes. But if I could also piggyback on one thing that Chris said, we have to keep in mind that with the way things are going right now, this type of off ramp, so to speak, that we're currently seeing with the hope of this ceasefire staying in place, is set on the precipice of a new type of world order, so to speak, in the Middle East. Because in these past 12 days, we've seen a lot of firsts. Of course, with Israel and Iran striking each other directly, that goes all the way back to April of 2024. But this type of direct conflict between these two countries, and also with the United States attacking Iran directly for the very first time, and then Iran countering and striking a U.S. military base in a Gulf state for the very first time, sets the blueprint, a very dangerous blueprint for further types of escalation. Because, like you said, no matter who the government is in Iran, no matter what kind of nuclear program they want to have, Netanyahu will not be happy with that. And then in the future, there will be another reason for him to want to bomb Iran. And then if the U.S. president doesn't have a level head, just like Chris said, it could lead to a higher escalation, because now we have the foundation of what this escalation is at a bare minimum. So finding this off ramp with this ceasefire and being able to have some type of deal where all parties agree is of the utmost importance, because this is essentially a ticking time bomb, so to speak.
Thanks, Reza. Let's bring in Seyed again. Seyed, any impression or understanding of just how much the nuclear program has cost the Iranian government over the years? How popular is this with the Iranian public?
Actually, as I said before, it seems that Iranian society in general is in support of the nuclear program, civil nuclear program. It has been not only shown or evident in some recent survey and studies. It has been mainly the result of long-term political support, or political, maybe one say political propaganda in favor of the nuclear program as a kind of the national pride. So I think in general, Iranian society is in support of it, and it's not a post-revolutionary phenomenon. It has some history back. But what's important is that Iranians are not saying what is happening now or what has happened in the last 12 days as a result of their nuclear program. They are, at the moment, they are the framework that Iranian society is understanding the Israelis' aggression is kind of the existential threat to the Iran as a civilizational, historical society. They are thinking that Israel's plan is not only against the Iranian nuclear program, is against the Iran as a regional power, and is part of the Israelis' aggression and expansionism that has affected several other countries before Iran, and Iran is not the only one. So I think Iranian society doesn't see the current situation as a result of the nuclear program. They are seeing the current situation as a result of as part of the Israeli fabric, as the source of insecurity in the region, and as a very expansionist and aggressive kind of the political project in the region. So I think we need to understand how Iranian society thinks about the current situation, whether or not they are thinking it only through the lens of the nuclear program, or they are thinking it as another regional aggression project that has been previously experienced and has been previously implemented in other countries in the region by the Israelis' aggression and expansionism.
Thanks, Seyed. Thomas, to you, how difficult do you now think it will be for Tehran to relaunch the nuclear program if that is the decision they make?
Well, again, without a detailed assessment, but I think a country with 90 million people, with vast territory, with experience, sooner or later they could get this running again at some level. But they'll be, hunted by the Americans and the Israelis. If you don't mind, I think something here is, why are they doing this? And why has this game been going on for 20 some years? And from my point of view, it was actually back in 2003, after 9/11, the Iranians were very happy with what happened in Iraq. The Americans had removed their mortal enemy from power, and they wanted to make a grand bargain. And they offered all sorts of things. They offered to, turn Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah into political social organizations, to make their nuclear program a tabletop program, help with Al Qaeda. And Bush thought it was great, and Connie Rice thought it was great, and Colin Powell. But the neocons came in and convinced them that, okay, so Iran sanctions are lifted. They make a lot of money in the oil sector. They're even now the fourth biggest producer. They're going to make a lot of money. Do you trust them not to do a Saddam, in the sense of, what Saddam did in Kuwait? Do you trust them? And Bush was convinced, no, I don't trust them. And on the Iranian side, they couldn't understand at first. Why did they say no? We agreed to everything the Americans ever wanted, and it sunk in that it's us they want. They don't trust us, and we're afraid of regime change. So that's why they basically restarted the nuclear program, in my view, at the time, was they didn't have any chip. They helped the Americans resolve the problems in Iraq, because that was existential to both sides, and they didn't have any chips left. So they developed this as a chip. And the same thing after ISIS. They were still suppressing ISIS. They still had this problem. And the problem with this chip is, if you go ahead and just develop a nuclear weapon, every president has said, we'll immediately bomb you. And, it'll be one or two nuclear weapons against a whole lot of them if it came down to that. So it's always been to come as close as you can to get the best deal. And essentially, it's for a security guarantee. Obama got the deal, but I would just say American political system was so maximalist, the hawks, they wouldn't even accept the deal where Iran gave up all its highly enriched uranium to the Russians. And we're following all the rules that were set down. So Trump came in, and he's not going to get any deal that's really better. It's just that if Trump does it now, after going through this, I think finally the hawks in the United States will go along with it. And on the other hand, the Iranians several times had opportunities where the Europeans intervened and others to say, look, if you make some deals, we can walk this along and you can join the family of nations. And they always balked at this, either because of internal conflict or ideological problems, whatever. So there's been dysfunction on both sides. Hopefully, I can see Witkoff came very close to a deal after 5 meetings with the Iranian foreign minister, and Trump had set a 60-day deadline. They didn't meet it, and he went along with, Bibi, with Netanyahu to do this. But the Iranians show they're still willing. It might be possible for Trump to make a deal, maybe not that different than Obama's JCPOA, and we move forward. That's what I would hope.
Thank you, Thomas. Chris, final point to you. As Thomas is pointing out, there's clearly a deal here to be had at some stage.
There's a deal, and one of the reasons that I think it could go forward is because actually it should be in the natural interests of all parties to go down this deal. Having seen and actually stared into the abyss of what war could have looked like, I think that there is a sharpening realization of what it could cost. Imagine if the Straits of Hormuz had been closed, and Thomas can probably elaborate in great detail as to what might have happened if Bushehr had been bombed and you'd had some sort of fallout. So having looked at that, I think most actors in the international system want to see a deal. They want to see a deal to welcome Iran into the family of nations. I think that's absolutely true. And they could put and should put a generous offer to the Iranians. Play ball. Don't start supporting armed actors across the region, undermine other states' security. Don't pursue a nuclear weapons program, and then, we can see sanctions lifted, you being part of the region once more. You've already repaired relations with Saudi Arabia and several other countries, and you can get back into a situation where Iran occupies the sort of status that it should have in the region. To do that, you've also got to persuade the Israelis. And you've got to say to Netanyahu, look, we've got this deal, go with Iran down this line. Maybe in the future there'll be some sort of acceptance of the other, an informal agreement or whatever between the two sides, Iran commits not to make threatening statements, Israel too, and the two can learn to live with each other, these two states. It will require, though, the other issues to be sorted out. If Gaza continues in the way that it's going, that genocide gets even worse as it is, then I'm afraid that will inspire other groups, other actors to take action. It will inspire hostility towards those who are complicit, including the United States, including countries like Germany and Britain. Also with Syria, if Israel continues to want to undermine the potential for a transition, a successful transition in Syria, that is also very destabilizing to the region. And remember that it was actually President Trump who said he was going to lift sanctions against Syria. So he's actually on board with a lot of the steps that are required for the region. Fine, yes. He hasn't got a sophisticated strategy. He doesn't really have the patience for it all. I think we're going to need many rounds of talks with the Iranians to produce this. You can't just set time limits like that. But I think he does actually want to see a region that is calmed, not set aflame.
Thank you, Chris. And to Reza, Thomas and Seyed in Tehran as well. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.